Hey, Red Clay Rambler fans, this year we're celebrating 10 years of the podcast. We just launched a fund drive, and I need your help to support this upcoming season. If you're able, please visit talesofaredclayrambler.com/donate to make your pledge through our PayPal portal. You can also become a patron on Patreon, which gives you access to perks like the Tales from the Vault podcast feed, which features remastered episodes that are no longer available. You can sign up for that at patreon.com/redclayrambler. We have brand new 10-year anniversary merch, including t-shirts, enameled pins, and a beautifully designed poster that are up for grabs when you make your pledge today. We'll also be taping a live episode on Zoom July the 25th at 7 p.m. to celebrate the anniversary. I'll be joined by Carol Epp and Britta Schroeder, as well as other special guests. Register now at brickyardnetwork.org/live. As always, thanks for listening, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 425 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I talk with Michael Sherrill, who creates mixed media sculptures that draw from the flora of Western North Carolina. In our interview, we talk about his early days as a salt-firing potter, how he's developed new techniques for sculptures, which is what he is widely known for now, and the creation of his Mud Tools brand. If you'd like to find out more or see examples of his work, you can go to michaelsherrill.com or mudtools.com. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Let's start talking about your upbringing. You grew up in Charlotte, and your father was a machinist, which I feel like that had to inform the way you think about making things. So can you talk about that a little bit?
My father actually, when I was small, moved back from Rhode Island. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, because he was actually making machinery for Fram oil filter company. And before that, he'd worked for Wix Manufacturing, which used to be the company that made truck oil filters. And so my father's patent led to the Coke can or the beer can, the deep draw. It doesn't have a seam; it's just drawn out of one piece of metal. And so that he has a patent with Wix, and I don't know, I didn't know it till after he had passed that. One of his fellow workers told me that, and I mean, he never told me. He just said, "Your dad has a patent for that technology," and so I grew up in the South for the best of my memory. I mean, and I watched my father be. He was a man of problem solving. He had the ability. He didn't make many sketches, but he'd build machinery that could fill a standard room. He principally had a way of building, and I understand that now because I'm a similar kind of fabricator when I've made machinery and stuff for my pottery career early on, and then we're still occasionally fabricating something here for Mud Tools and or the processes that I'm doing now with this colored clay. I'm having to make devices that properly work with that. My dad was never happier than when he had a problem to solve. It's just, that was his nature. He found that engaging in his life. And I love to tell the story that my dad would be noodling a problem. He'd come home from work and be sitting after dinner in his chair at the table, and he'd have his head slightly bent down. And my mom would come by and says, "Now you kids have got to be quiet because your dad's having a brainstorm." And so I went, "A brainstorm? What is that?" and so, but he was going through all the options in his head of how to do something, how to do a process. And I'm the same way. I mean, I think even in my early years of making pots, I was started in high school, and but I was within 30 minutes of Matthews, North Carolina, where there was fourth generation potters still making traditional pots, and they also made flower pots. The other part of the family made flower pots. So I would literally get in the car in high school and drive down and see a fourth generation potter. And so I got that. I got something from the young guy who was a student teacher in my high school, was a ceramic major and was planning to teach. But he, so I was getting a little bit of that college kind of view of clay as well. So I was audited classes at a girls' college called Queens College, which you may know about. And Rick Crown was the teacher. He was an Alfred grad and a super nice guy. And he let me come in and just hang out and audit. And the first high-fire pottery I fired in a kiln was in their kiln at Queens College. And coming to clay was, I realize now, looking back over my life, that I'm very much a three-dimensional thinker. I think in three dimensions. I really appreciate malleability of being able to move things around. It shows up very clearly in my ladder work because I'm using other materials, but I'm choosing things that are a lot like clay. They're malleable. You can push them around. You can judge them. You can say, yes, that looks right. No, that doesn't look right. And I just know that fits with the way my brain works. And so, and I think when, early on I had, even in scouting, I went to a big gathering, and there was a different potter. I think he was like a fifth generation traditional potter throwing there, and stood around and watched him with my jaw open, never had any instruction, and thought it was cool. And then tried to throw with no instruction at all in junior high. But with that student teacher, his name, oh gosh, my brain's going dead here. I'll think of it later. But he just gave me just the barest of instruction, and it just clicked. I mean, I just had that instant affinity to throwing, and that's what sucked me in. I mean, I just fell in love with understanding how to do that one little thing. But I mean, I'm a dyslexic kid then, not stupid, I know that, but I felt kind of dumb because I struggled with things in school. But I found something that I love to do, and that really was the lens in which the wider world opened up to me, was through clay. Clay's my first love, and it's the lens in which opened up me understanding chemistry and doing whatever math I needed to do functionally, to understanding sort of the broader, tackling the problems of just trying to start my first pottery when I was 19 years old. I mean, I didn't have not much money at all. I had some soft brick, a couple hard brick, a Lockerbie kick wheel, and a lot of ball clay. And so I had a lot of dunting the first few firings I had, because I thought I could make pots out of ball clay. But the thing is, I didn't let this stand in the way. I couldn't weigh glazes, so I made a balance beam and counted out BBs, 100 bag, 50 bags, and that's how I'd weigh that would be my grams. So I'd use that to calibrate all my glazes and slips. And it worked. I mean, it worked. And that was a picture of me at my exhibition I had in DC. And you can look on that wall and you see all these things that I couldn't afford to buy, but that I had made to be able to make pots. And it wasn't because of Michael Cardew, wanted to be that pioneer. It was out of necessity. This is the early 70s. And so I mean, this is the Carter years, the gas crisis, you name it. We were living on very little each week. I built my first studio on the side of a milk barn out of Russon wood, and had a very tolerant landlord, which was great. But I came to the mountains not knowing diddly squat about salt glazing, but knowing that that's what I wanted to do. And I think that was inspired in many ways by the little pamphlet that the American Craft Council put out with Karen Carnes' pot on the cover. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's got a blue pot of hers with nice orange peel in it, and inside it has mostly Don Wright's talking about his process and sort of going through it. And I said, well, it's a simple enough process. It means I don't have to have these many shells. I don't have to do all this other stuff. But I didn't know anything about it. And Nelson Book of Ceramics had a paragraph about that long. I mean, 2 inches maybe. And I'm trying to think the other book that we used as our Bibles, but it's about the same thing. Both of it's just a very short. I think it was Rhodes' book. Probably had 3 paragraphs. It was about the same length. It's just put pots in the kiln, get them really hot, and throw rock salt in your ports, and here's what you got. That was a really moment of being out in the desert a little bit and trying to figure it out. And I had some technical problems along the way. Tom Turner was just down the road when he was at Clemson University. He was helpful to talk me through a few things and kind of point me in the right direction. I worked myself into a corner, and then eventually I just had to say, can you look into this and see what I'm doing, right or wrong, and help me figure out where I'm going. And the other person who gave so much to me was Cynthia Bringle. And Cynthia just, she didn't just give me help with my technical stuff and the things that I couldn't afford to go to Penland. Penland was outside of my financial means to go to Penland at the time. But I could go visit, and she was kind enough to, I got to know her. And then I called her up one day and went up there and got some slips that were working better in the salt. And I tell the story about her all the time because I go back to hand her glaze book back, and I'm saying thank you, and she takes the other end of it and says, well, I've given something to you. I said, you need to do the same, like paying it forward. And that's definitely Cynthia Bringle. And that is really the spirit that I've seen in the craft movement at large, especially at Penland all the years, that really we're not hoarders of our knowledge. Like if you're a painter, they don't necessarily talk or share. But we have benefited from the collegiate quality of our discipline of clay, and every other one is similar to that. I think glass and metals and fiber, and just a whole gambit of people who work with material. We've given what we know away. And here's the thing that I think is different from traditional potters who really scraped to have a look and a livelihood, and very secretive about their glazes or their methods. The college sort of post-World War II flipped all of that on its head, where it's all about sharing and learning. And I think that's what started us on this more collegiate way of looking at making and sharing. I think it was a big deal. And salt glaze was my thing for 10 years. Loved it. Single fired, which to this day, I kind of miss the immediacy of that process. And also dancing between all the failures. You glaze something, it's perfect, but it splits before it, you just got your timing off wrong. And it's, but it led me toward the work I do now. I mean, I think that sense of layering and depth of surface and form is still guides my current work. And as I moved further down toward the end of the 70s and into the 80s, things were starting to change aesthetically. There was more of this sort of dit dot kind of contemporary um, kind of decoration going on, and I was involved in that. And salt only gave me a spectrum of brown, gold, blue, green. There was not a big color spectrum there. And so that was pushing me toward doing things with raku and some other things, which taught me so much. I mean, taught me um, experimentally. I was involved with layering and picking up glazes and putting them down with little wires that made like bubbles, little odd things that you'd find or see. And that's the other thing about my practice is I'm sort of an omnivore. When I see something out in the world that I go, that's clever, and I go, is that something I could use? Is that something I could bring back into my work? And to this day, I celebrate people that really are clever with what they're doing, and they still make good things. I mean, can't just be clever. You have to do something that really is got some solidity to it that makes it worthy of a collector wanting to have it or institution to collect it. And on a professional basis, I began wanted to be a member of Southern Holland's Handicraft Guild, and they would buy pots in the wintertime. And that was a slow time for that. And they had like 3 retail areas, I think. And they had a show that was in Gatlinburg before I became a member that people were reportedly making half a year's salary, out of that one show. And so I said, maybe if I can be a member, I can eat in the wintertime. It provide me, some way of sustaining myself. And by that time I was married and almost, my first child come along. So, I mean, I had to work. I had to work to figure it out and to make it happen. But being a part of a professional organization like the Southern Highlands, which is, if not the oldest, almost the oldest craft guild in the United States, and with some really cool people. I mean, I'm telling you, Rudy Osolnik was a very famous wood turner. He became a dear friend, and I had another friend as a jeweler, and all of us people that were this hippie age group that were coming in and sort of displacing people or expanding, however you want to look at it, the sort of variety of what kind of stuff was being shown there. The reality is that was my education, was being a part of an organization. Now, that's when you come to think of, why have I been involved in volunteering my time and effort toward organizations? In Southern Highlands for many years, I was on the board, the Center for Craft. I'm currently on the Bray board. And then I've done consulting and doing some other things on the side. It's because I really believe that our culture needs to be supported. And I've been, even when I didn't have much money, I did it with my time and my effort to sort of see the culture grow, because it meant something to me to have a culture standing there that I could go to, and it helped me along. And I think the Bray is a great example of that when it comes to, postgraduate people come in and any of the residents. I think pre-graduate, I don't know exactly where the cutoff line is at the Bray, but that right there is this chance to mature the work. If they want to teach, they have a chance to be shooting toward that. If they really want to practice and set up a studio as an artist practice, that gives them a chance to connect with collectors and to do the groundwork and get to see the culture a little deeper, at least in Montana. And Penland did the same thing. Penland provided a place to meet collectors. So, doing the auction at Penland, you meet probably all the East Coast museum people who have a craft collection. You meet them, you talk to them, you get the chance to be friends with folks who run institutions. And I think that's I constantly say, if you want to be part of a culture, you got to understand that culture. You got to spend a little time there to see how it works, how it functions, what motivates a collector. What motivates a collector? Well, you get to know some collectors, and you always see it. You travel with some collectors, and you get to see what that culture is like between 3 or 4 collectors who say, "Boy, I love that," and or someone saying, working with the curator and say, "Well, yeah, I'll purchase that for you for your collection," and you realize that there's something larger than even I could dream of when I was that young salt glaze potter who was just hoping to sell enough to eat and pay my bills.
At some point, the vessel, it's not that the vessel didn't become important. I've seen you make vessels over the years in different ways, but the sculptural object became more of the focus. But I wanted to talk about the transition point, where you're putting the salt glaze down in terms of the economics, like this is going to be the way I'm going to make a living, and then I'm going to be a sculptor. Tell me about the risk and reward involved with jumping into sculpture as a way to make a living and as a creative endeavor.
So the way it happened for me was I was making salt glaze pieces and then started doing some large raku vessels and things, and they became non-functional, just more just something to have sitting around someone's house. And so they were doing very well. And I mean, that was that indication of, hey, I love function. I like things. I mean, I like the things of having a nice mug that it fits my hand. I love all the subtlety, the lip, the way it works. I mean, I'm all over that stuff. I mean, and I like simple pots generally. If I'm buying pots, I'm buying rather simple pots. But when it comes to my journey was just like changing the weight of my feet from one to the other. So I started moving in a direction. I didn't know if there was going to be anybody there to buy what I was creating. And by that time I was getting on the road. So I was doing the Frederick Craft Show. I was going down to Miami. I was sort of branching out of this region close by. And then as that started to mature, it went fairly non-functional within a short period of time. I just went, okay, there's people here that love this stuff and like this stuff, and I'm enjoying doing this. And so, there came a point when my wife Marjorie, I was a single parent for about 5 years, and Marjorie and I got married, and that's been 33 years ago, which is hard for me to believe. But that was a moment where I'd really done some very minimalist abstract work up to that point, and it started to get to that point. And when she and I were married, it just gave me the opportunity to kind of zero in on that thing. So I did the Smithsonian Craft Show, the Philadelphia Craft Show, for almost 10 years straight. Maybe not the Philadelphia, but almost Smithsonian. And I think that was a real trigger for me because I met the national collectors. I got to see what they found interesting in my work. And it allowed me to dream bigger and to think that I can do this a little different. There's an opportunity here. And my risk, I've always been a risk taker, but it's always measured risk. I'm not like completely, and I'll stop here and just say one thing that I could do. I could think of a style and recreate a whole series of work that you probably have never seen. And the only way you'd see it is to go through my slide archive. And I could just sort of take a design problem in my mind and create a body of work that looked really cool. But what I was doing in many ways is I was creating an audience just like we do your pots. People are familiar with your pots and you change it really fast. They're going, hey, I like those old pots. I like the old thing you did. But so I realized that what I was doing was really leapfrogging over my audience. So when I tried to take a step forward, I would expand things side to side. So I'd take that idea and I'd push it out this way. So that gave me plenty of room to work and play, but I didn't have to leave that audience that's going to see me next year. And so that little bit of maturity helped me. It sort of got me realizing that I can grow and I can do these ideas that I've got out there on the edge, but that I also was aware that I have an audience and I want to bring them with me on this travel, on this trip with me. And so I started being mindful of them, which was to my benefit. It's actually fueled a lot of that transition. So I was making those bottle forms were kind of the big thing, and teapots with Leslie Farron. And Leslie came to Washington, and that's the first time we met. She still had her place called Pinch Pottery, if you remember that. And so Leslie asked me to start showing with her, and that's about the time Sofa started. So New Art Forms was first, and I think she may have even taken something of mine then, and then right after that. And I didn't go. I couldn't go. I was home trying to make stuff and didn't go all the time. But she created a great market for me, and I was doing shows here in the South. Blue Spiral was a regular. I had a great gallery in Atlanta. I had about 5 galleries, and there were rotating shows at that point. So my career had really changed. So now I'm doing gallery shows, and I'm on the road still, going to Smithsonian and Philadelphia, but that was about it. And then things started going really well at Sofa, and Leslie said it's time to kind of get off the road, because I don't think you can go to the next place being on the road the way you are. And I think she was right. And so I think that was a big jump, was going to Sofa. I mean, it was some serious heavy hitters. I mean, you had all the people that June and Don Wrights, and just on and on in the clay world, and you had all that great glass going on, and Billy Morris and Dale Chihuly and Wendell Castle. I mean, it was an awesome place to be, and so I was there for enough years that I went here again. I had the opportunity to raise the bar. I saw something that I was doing well at, and people liked what I was doing. But I'd walk around and go, I can do not their work, I can do my work and raise the bar. And that's what allowed me to sort of find my way into spending more time on a single piece, and instead of doing 10 things at once, which I would in the early days it would be more like 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, I just spent the past year and a half on one piece, and I can't blame that on COVID. I can, but I won't. But it was, and I feel I just installed it last Saturday in New York City, and I look back and I go, I did the best job I could, and I'm very pleased with what I did. I mean, I think that's it for an artist. That's what they're wanting, and they want their work to be shared so other people can enjoy it and participate in it. I mean, right before COVID, I had a show that originated at the Mint Museum in Charlotte, was organized by them, and from there it went to the Smithsonian, the Renwick, and it was there for 7 months. And a lot of it had to do with the timing of their shows, so I got a little extra time in that. And then right before COVID, it went to Tempe. It was at the University of Arizona, and so, I mean, I look at that, and I know. I think the reason some of this happened was I work in that culture. I know the people. I've done my work, and it's not one thing. I didn't bribe anybody. I didn't blackmail anybody. I just tried to do my best and tried to show up. I mean, and be consistent if I can be, and so, I mean, I still go, how did that happen? I mean, I look back over my shoulder and I'm grateful that it happened. And I'm standing here, 68 years old, and I'm working hard to stay active and engaged in what I'm doing. And I'm still wanting to make the next best piece I can make. And I think that's the way it saddened me, because I've known a lot of friends who just kind of sort of hit the wall. They hit the wall with what they're doing and the way it's going, and they make a major change. And I'm going, I feel for them. It's not a bad thing. It's just their decision. But I go, I still feel pleasure in doing what I do. And so now my career is, I'm working. Metal entered into when I made the switch back into porcelain. So at first was iron for a while. And what I skipped over the fact that in high school, I worked my uncle had a steel fabrication plant. So I learned how to fabricate, and, I made my own pottery equipment and kiln frames and that kind of stuff. So that was a good basis for me. But come face forward, and I want to take porcelain clay and make big things. All of a sudden, metal becomes the way to achieve almost the impossible if you were asking clay alone to do it. And so that mushroomed up, and I was working in color, and I've been around a lot of glass. And so all of a sudden I'm going, I can get something in Moretti, Italian glass, cane glass, and flame working that I really is hard to get in clay. I can get it in clay, but maybe this is going to be more luscious. And so all this stuff started to come together. So I'm working mostly in, colored clay right now, and bronze and glass. And the glass is all flame work. But the surface, it marries. People look at it and they don't know that it's not glass or clay. They don't know. And I love that. I love the fact it's a little bit of mysterious. And this clay is actually treated like a piece of glass. I mean, I use diamond stuff on it. I buff it out. I do a lot of things that a glass worker would do. And the same thing goes with the glass. So it has that surface connection that makes it more believable. And, and I'll just make a jump into maybe what I'm trying to do with my art. So I was, doing modernist kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden I made this turn back into a natural narrative kind of platform. And, postmodernism was all the rage, and everybody was doing whatever they wanted to, it seemed like. And I'm in a big new studio, and I'm walking outside and just being blown away where I live. It's gorgeous. I live in a little community called Bat Cave, North Carolina, and it's in a gorge. And I have water around me, which is great since I love to fish so much. But that started to creep in, and I had to do more. First of all, it started with surface. So I had this poplar tree that this time of year, even now, early in the midsummer, the leaves get real waxy occasionally and drop off, and they have this beautiful waxy yellow with little green and brown kind of spots on it. And I just, this is just a beautiful thing. And the influence of being in Southern Appalachian, where you have furniture that has 3 or 4 layers of paint and gets rubbed through, and some of my other friends, Randy Schul, and there's 3 or 4 of us that were working on this sort of revealed surface, or kind of working through and being influenced by this region. And if there was a moment where I said, if there's an aesthetic that's at, the Asheville, Appalachian area, it was that worn through kind of surface kind of look. And so I started with that, layering colors and then reducing them back by scrubbing them in the between. So I'd bisque a color on, so I got a foundation color. Then I'd add all these ungobes. Then I'd work back through, and then bisque again, and then glaze, fire, sandblast, polish. So it's it's a long process, but it gave me the surface value that I really loved, and sort of this blush or transitional. And now I'm using the extruder became important to me back when I was making big teapots, because I would make the handles and spouts with that. And that had to do with just trying to solve a problem of stress in the clay wanting to, once it's fired, it wants to move a little bit. And I was making these long spouts that were probably 25, 26 inches, and maybe even greater. So the extruder became a tool that I needed to use to do that effect. But as I worked with the extruder, I realized I could do so much more. And that's one of the things that I've expanded on over the years, because I feel like the extruder is like the hidden secret, because if you can make a tube, you can hand build anything out of a tube. And it's just a great jump off tool for that. Well, I did a trip up to Watershed and took my extruder with me. And I said, I'm not going to do anything except work on laminating several different colors of clay and trying to figure out what happens when you extrude them. And so out of that time being at Watershed, I just played and I found some stuff and I went, oh my gosh, this is just cool. This is like organizing your color way before you use it. And then you could reveal it by cutting or rubbing through it, but really cutting was probably at the time the most dramatic look. And so that has been in the background of my work for the past 15 years. And now it's it's the driving force. Really, is organizing clay and then making what a glass person would call a millefiore or marini. But I'm not interested in what it looks like at the end of the cane. I'm interested in the transitional color that's on the lateral vein. So if you cut it open, the gorgeous transitions between colors and things are just awesome, I just was looking at one of my pieces I did about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was telling the collector, I said, you don't know how many pieces I made to make this piece. In other words, there's so many pieces of porcelain that didn't make the cut. So it's probably 10 to 1, 10 times as many components than actually went into that piece because I wanted it a certain way. And so, I mean, you can see that I like being pulled along and love to be tantalized by sort of the horizon of what can be done, what I can do, or what my imagination thinks about. And that keeps me from being bored. That's for sure. Cause I'm seeing things. I go, I'd like to try that. I'd like to, and I'm not alone. I mean, I think our people in our world are doing it. I mean, I'm seeing things that because of social media and everything else, people doing things that I haven't, necessarily mind or thought about, and I think are awesome and clever, and not only that, aesthetically beautiful. So, I mean, I think we're living in a real awakening of clay not being a stepchild of the art world. I think we're actually graduating from that into being accepted as serious art. I mean, I think the evidence of the past 7 or 8 years really tells us that. And I think those divisions that we used to have, that sort of handed down by the university, is is dissolving a little bit. And that's why you see people working in clay, but they're also combining other materials successfully. I mean, some are not successful. Some are not doing it, but there's a bit of play and experimentation.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Amoco Brent. For the past 100 years, Amoco Brent has been creating ceramic supplies for our community, ranging from underglazes to electric kilns, and they have no plans of slowing down. With over 3,000 products, Amoco Brent's top priority is making sure that all of their customer needs are met. From the professional to the student and everyone in between, their high-quality materials enable you to make your best work. To learn more, check them out at amoco.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Amoco Brent. You can also show them how you use Amoco by sharing your work online with the hashtag HowIAmoco. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfeld Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of thousands of objects made by over 800 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfeldcollection.com. There was one time when I was a resident at Odyssey. This was back in like 2006 or so, and you came to talk to us about making a living as a young artist and how to find your voice. And I will always remember you talked about that your early pottery career was going pretty well when you decided to go towards sculpture. And the way you described it at the time was, I was working on this stuff and I figured it out, so then I moved on to something new.
That's true. That's true.
I remember thinking about all these years, I've been thinking like, he was doing something successful and changed, not he was doing something that failed and changed. So It seems to me like there's something that's a part of your personality that you have. One, you don't want to get bored. And then two, you're starved for new information. Or it seems like maybe you're starved for a new process that creates new information. What do you think that is in your personality that encourages that?
I don't know. I mean, I show a slide at my current slideshow is a painting of as Victor Franklin. Oh gosh, my brain's not pulling his name up. But it's looking out on the fog, sea of fog is what's called. But the guy's got his back to you, and he's looking at this landscape that's just like limitless. That has that feeling. And I can tell you that I feel that way right now at this moment, and I felt that way when I was a young person who came to clay. That I can work in this field and never exhaust it, never understand it, and just that's exciting to me because it's not finite. It's more infinite in nature than I as a normal human being could ever exhaust. It's just not going to happen. And I love that. I mean, to me, that's a sense of adventure. So I'm getting ready to hopefully get in the car and go to the Bray gathering, and I'm hoping my car is gonna chug its way across there, and it's because I want to see the country. I want to see and get a breath again. And I've done this for the past almost 10 years. I've been driving out west, and either at our Anderson Ranch or out at the Bray, or out to LH Project with Chris and Jake. And I just I love it. I love being able to see the breadth of this country and realize I'm on a line. I'm on a line, and I'm seeing what's on either side of that line. And this nation is so vast beyond my imagination. That's exciting. And when I was just in New York and installed, and we got to do 2 days of art. So we went to Metropolitan, had a bang up trip there, loved it, and then the Guggenheim and Cooper Hewitt, and then the next day we went to MoMA. And I tell you what, I loved so much. I loved about that, but I loved walking into the Richard Serra's at MoMA and looking at those big, solid blocks of steel and just other. I mean, that's just beautiful other. And I mean, I'm a guy who grew up around steel, so I mean, I had this kind of appreciation for it. But I love that. I mean, my artists are I love Richard Serra, Murakami. I mean, it's pretty vast. I'm not just one kind of thing, but I just, it's so great to see people knock it out of the park. Amish Kapoor. I mean, his beam, for instance, I reference it a lot because I think it does something that I hope my art does, is in Chicago, that object engages people from every level of life. I mean, so I saw a Hispanic wedding taking place right by it and underneath it. And I've seen people dressed up in suits pondering it, and tourists pondering it, everybody. I mean, skateboarders underneath it. That to me is an incredible thing, to create something that draws people to it. They maybe not completely understand it. Why is this thing the way it is? But it creates an awe. And awe is really what we need as human beings. We need something that's bigger than us. It's like looking up the stars and going, how vast is that? How big is that thing? Because it creates for us as human beings the sense that there's limitless out there. Maybe there's more, we're not limited in our potential to reach for that. Not that, I mean, it's going to be baby steps for all of us, but literally we can reach for something that's really kind of out there and kind of cool and awesome. And in other terms, I mean, I'm seeing some of that happen in my kids. My kids are sort of, they're the younger one, especially, and my oldest son's a painter. They have this really wonderful, they do stuff and I go, darn, that's cool. I mean, I'm just kind of like, I love that engine in them. I love that creativity in them. I take joy and pleasure in it. And the same thing, if you meet somebody, when I'm teaching and I watch them do something that maybe I'm showing them a technique and it's sort of my bailiwick, and then they do something with my thing that I just never imagined. I love that. And then I can point out, say, that's cool. What you just did. I've not seen anybody do that. I haven't. And so, I mean, to me, that makes us have a little more room for each other, a little more mercy, a little more. And we know that we're tiny, tiny, finite, but we're in this incredible infinite that we can greet, we can look at and ponder.
Well, yeah, I wanted to jump into the philosophical parts of being in awe. I have had that experience looking at your work. The first time I ever saw one of the rhododendron pieces, it was at Blue Spiral. And I just walked in and I knew that it wasn't real, but I had the feeling it was real. Like it had beauty in a way that animated itself. And I think that's the sense of awe. Do you think that's just aesthetic? Do you think that is somehow like a spiritual thing that humans like recreate meaning through beauty? Like how do you think that happens in the bigger picture sense?
I mean, I just experienced awe on the Richard Serras, but I also went into the new setting of the Greek section at the Metropolitan. And I'm seeing these little tiny pieces of fragment that are just 3,000 years old. And I'm going, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. It's just this beautiful thing that, and some human like me created that thing 3,000 years ago. That's unfreaking believable. So awe is to me, I mean, it's like James Sherrill, he's after light, space, but he's after awe. He's after that undefined thing that I mean, if I could write, I would be a writer because I love the written word. I'm not a writer. It's just not my skill. I love it. I appreciate it. And but what happens in literature also happens in art, which is an author can take you along a journey that's got all these little parts that move along. And then all of a sudden they can take you to a place that you go, wow, that's incredible. And then you come out of it and you go, it's hard to describe what they just did to me. It's hard to describe what that writer just did to me in that story, but they touched me. That was meaningful. I'm thinking about that. And I think art is that way. There's this, I mean, Jordan Peterson, I've heard him say it a couple of times where he says, if an artist already knows what he's going to do, it's not really art. That really that sort of engagement with the creating of something, being alive to it, being in the moment with it, that's where that thing is hard to verbalize, can be really manifest in an object, in a visual object. And I think we need it. We, as human beings, it's almost like we need each other. We need kindness. We need the kind of stuff that gives us hope. I mean, we need color. We need light. We don't want everything to be dark and doomed and negative. And we need to be elevated. We need that sort of elevation. Thus, the word awe is really a word that I use often because I'm in awe. I mean, so this whole idea of, I say art is like this. So I go see something, like I went this past weekend and I saw incredible piece of art. Well, someone sent something over the net. It's like playing tennis. They sent something over to me and it impacted me. And all I want to do is I'd like to play in that game. I'd like to be able to pop that ball back over the net as being me, as not being them, but being me, and us play this conversation back and forth because they've done something good to me. It's like going to, I'm a big fan of the band Jungle and Mike Snow and crazy stuff like that. And I've seen a couple of their concerts in the past before COVID, but they were awesome. Both of they're just awesome. And I go there, man, what a great experience. I mean, that's just that's the same thing I want to do, but I'm doing my thing. I'm not making music. I'm not putting words together. I'm just making things out of material. And I'll take a little moment in the sense that this last piece that I did, I had a chance to live with the piece a little longer. It was highly detailed compared to some of my stuff. It just had the clients sort of made it possible for me to really dig in, and it's great to live with clay. You make it, you fire it. There's not a lot you can do. You can't go moving around, but metal, the armature or the skeleton of my pieces. I'm really living with them, and I'm walking around and I can see them in all dimensions, sideways, top, bottom. And there's this wonderful play of living with that object and being able to walk in and go, it just needs to be tweaked or it needs to be moved a little bit. And, the whole act of assembly is one of a dance, much like dancing, because you've created all these objects that you want to have cohesion, but they're working off of each other. And you've got extra components and you're sitting there kind of building it like a puzzle almost. But in that, it entertains me because sometimes something happens and I go, oh, whoa, that's cool. That really works. And then sometimes I do something, I go, no, that's not the right thing. And I change something. But that's it's life-giving to be able to engage with your material that way. It really is.
Well, one of the things I wanted to wrap up is talking about how you have created mud tools, which are tools that lots and lots of potters use. I mean, ironically, I think people know you as a sculptor and then they know mud tools, but I don't know if people always know that if they're in Western North Carolina, they do, but like in Michigan, do they know that you are the sculptor that also makes mud tools?
Yeah.
So talk about that project and how starting a company that's a tool making company has then maybe informed your work or maybe not. Like how did this start on a path?
Well, I'm the guy that gets on the elevator with the 20 somethings at Ensika and they go, oh, the mud tools man. and I go, yeah, I am the mud tools man. But the thing that it goes back to my early years of making the things I needed, one, but I've always been a little bit of a junkie when it comes to material. So I see material, and I used to say that I have a little box of the precious tool and a big trash can full of the ones that didn't work, that the ideas didn't work, but the ones that were really stayed in my practice, and then I would go and teach, and people would respond to those and want the tools that I had made. And at that point, I was busy and I wasn't going to make them. But I found myself in the early years, I found myself making pretty good money, but paying a lot out in taxes and not really having my money work for me. And I'm not a guy that invests in stock market and that kind of stuff. Not that I can't, but I generally invest in things that I understand or have some knowledge of, and so or have a little bit of control of the outcome, how it's going to happen. So I made the first ribs I made for myself, and people wanted them. And my friend I grew up with, Mark Warren, he and I went to high school, junior high, Cub Scouts together. So we've long history. He met me out west, and we fished our way across the United States one summer. And he said, that crazy idea you have. I said, I'll make the first mold to make the first rib. And so the first year I was giving them away. I'd see people give them to them, and they go, what do I need this for? And the next year they go, you got any more of those things you gave me last year? I'd like to have some. And I just had this sense that because I was fortunate to teach, that I thought that I had something that would work. And I think I've got a problem solving kind of side to me that likes design problems, design work. Once we started making them, then I had a place to place extra cash. So I was investing back in the molds and the business. And before long, it was starting to show promise. And so I just started turning the extra money that I had at the end of the year into more molds, which are quite expensive. And I had a friendly helper in my friend Mark. He laughed. He said, "Oh, this will never go anywhere." I now constitute way over half of his business, and Mud Tools does. There's machines making mud tools, many machines making mud tools every day, every working day, except Saturday and Sunday, and it's I'm so grateful because I mean I think those of us who are artists and know that we're going to eventually get older. This has been something that is a retirement plan. You know, a lot of artists have had a chance to get in on real estate and sit on that real estate and watch it gain in value. But I think we have to be entrepreneurial if we're going to survive, if we're going to run our own studio, if we have, I mean, you're doing podcasting and your practice of your work. And I think those are the ways that I always feel like that if you're going to be working in clay, try to keep anything moving toward that discipline, not go over here completely and do something totally different, but try to stay as close as you can so that the force of what you're doing is going to add up into something in the end. And Mud Tools has really been that for me. I mean, I love to design things. I mean, part of my design process is I make a shape, I model it out of material, and I walk around touching it, sticking it in my pocket, thinking about it. Is this the right shape? Is this the right edge? Is this the right material? And doing a lot of experimentation with materials. That's how, to be honest with you, that's how the different durometers happened in the ribs, because I realized in the testing of these materials, we would go, oh, I can use this for this, and I really want one of these too. And so we realized that a spectrum was really going to open things up. So in a case in point too, with the ribs, I didn't want to make them so specialized that they weren't in many ways universal. So, I mean, I thought about radiuses that you needed in our smaller set of ribs. I feel like we've got a really good variation for people for making small things. And then the big platter ribs, they have their place. They had a place in my practice. So I felt like they would have a place in other people's practice. And I'm a guy that knows how material behaves, knows how clay behaves. So therefore, when I'm designing a trim tool like the Dual, I'm out there running it and seeing if I'm breaking the chip the way I want to break the chip. And so those are things that actually there's a lot of pleasure in it. My son, we're tinkering with the new handle design for the pedal knives, which have been kind of off the market during COVID. And we're creating some of these really gorgeous sort of patterned handles. And I don't know if it's going to make it. I think they'll make them into production, but it's such fun. I mean, he and I are both going, whoa, that's cool. That's a lot of fun. And so it's been, I mean, I think, I mean, my wife and I were in Japan, 4 years ago. And so we were over at Takashi Nakazato. I think somebody had a show, and we were for that with Doug K. Spear and other friends. We had a great time. And we're walking in Kyoto up on the Temple Mount, and we're a little small studio there, and young guy probably in his late 20s sitting there making pots, and there's my tools laying on his work table. And so I pull one out of my pocket and give him another one, and he just, the biggest grin comes about. And we have, this, just knowing that they're around the world. I mean, that's a real thing. And we're trying to make our things as much as possible domestically. We have our own crew here, and then we have people that, like I mentioned earlier, that do things like stamping, big machines that stamp out the Duals, for instance, and then we do all the sharpening and bending and heat treating. We're doing all that in-house. And more and more, some of this stuff is coming back in as we've grown. Where our capacity to do plastic injection, that's in the works right now. And we, I can come up with an idea, and we have the facility to change and test and see if we're on the right track. And that, I want it to be like my artwork. I want it to be something that is well thought out, made within the strictures of being affordable for everyone, the best quality possible. And I think our industry in the U.S. is seeing some weirdness in the supply chain side. like the materials that we use to manufacture even steel. It's hard to get the alloys that we're looking for, and things of that nature. So it's going to be interesting for the next little bit. I don't know how long, but it is just, and it divides me a little bit, but at the same time, it's just, I'm taking care of my family. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, to me, I've failed as an artist if I failed as being taking care of my family, and not being a father to my children, and not being present. I mean, that to me is way more important than. And so there was that point where things were going really well, and Mud Tools was a little bit of a distraction. But I'm going, I can't abandon this, because I know this can outlive me. If something happens to me, I get in bad, this will continue, and then come from my family. And it's, I've lived a non-traditional life. I mean, my stepfather, the first time I just told the story to someone, my stepfather was, he was the one who said, no, you can't make a living making pottery. He was a salesman, had a new car every 2 years, and he very conventional. And he said, no, you just can't do that. No one can do it. You shouldn't do it. And I went to my real dad, the inventor, and I said, here's what I want to do. And he looked at me, he says, son, work is hard. It's really nice when you love what you do. And it's just like he gave me his blessing. But the turn of that was the first time that I sold anything for over, I think I sold something for $32,000. And this has been almost 18 years ago or something like that. And that's more than he ever made in a year.
Wow.
And he went, what? He's shaking his head back and forth and going, what did you sell that for? And I wasn't, it's just me following my passion. Somehow that worked out for me. And that's the other thing too, is I feel like those of us who are out there being adventurous enough to pursue our passion should not let anyone lay stumbling blocks in front of us that we can't step over. And I encourage people to find ways through first before you have to go around. Just push right through it. And hardship builds character. I hate to say it, sound like an old man, but it's true. It's true. It creates perseverance. And to me, that's what gets you through when things are not working out so well. And it really is.
Well, I think this goes back to, I think it was in earlier, maybe you said this in another interview, that dyslexia was a big part of learning as a childhood. And so you had to learn ways around things and through things, and just to persevere and also trust in yourself. Because a lot of times if the teacher's saying you're wrong, you're not doing this right, but you're in your mind going, no, I can understand this. I just don't understand it the way you're teaching it to me. Like, you have to develop the self-confidence to be able to push through.
Yeah, no, I think there's a book called The Gift of Dyslexia, and it's there's truth to that. There's I think the way my mind works is because I'm highly visual, and I think a lot of people who are highly visual do have some perception problems when it comes to symbols and things of that nature. But we also have gifts that come with it. Malcolm Gladwell talks about that, and David and Goliath, and some of those other books he's written. He sort of touches on that gift that comes with sometimes a deficit at the same time. I don't know if you've seen the movie with Claire Danes, Temple Grandin.
Oh yeah.
So right. I was a resident at the Tacoma Glass Museum, and I'd finished my day, and it'd been a hot day in the studio. I came back, took a shower, and I was by myself. I was going to go out to dinner. And that happened to be on, and I didn't really know the story, and I'm completely captivated by the telling of this movie. And it's worth a lot of people who would find this interesting. They should look back and watch this movie. And I'm getting further, and I'm not autistic, but I'm dyslexic. And it's like I'm partially on that spectrum of what's going on. And I was in tears by the time I got about 3/4 of the way through that. Understood that. I mean, I understood that in that character. And she's you know, it nails that struggle, the sort of struggle that someone goes through, and she persevered and found a way. And then the people around her helped her. I mean, her poor mom, she believed in her and moved her forward. And that's the other thing, is that having someone to help my wife Marjorie, when we were married, did so much to sort of make sure that my show applications were on time and doing things like that. Because to this day, Destiny, who basically keeps my calendar, she keeps me in pace with what I need to do, because my brain's going this way and that way, and that coordinating effort I really appreciate. It helps me to do more than I could have done without, and I don't drop the ball that much. So, but I go back and go that I'll say it one more time. Thank you, Lord, for dyslexia.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Can you leave both your website and also the Mud Tools website?
Well, Mud Tools is mudtools.com with a mudtoolss.com. And my web address is michaelsherrill.com.
In the retrospective that you mentioned, that was at the Mint Museum at the Renwick and at ASU, and there was great documentation at all three spots. So I recommend people go back and look at some of that.
Yeah, thank you. There's a video that was made, a little short film that was made of sort of the studio, and kind of looks at my practice and family and stuff. It's really nice. It's up on the web somewhere, and I don't know exactly, but you just look at retrospective, Michael Sherrill retrospective video, you probably would find it. And then there was some wonderful interviews that came out of being in DC that it can be found too during the same time period.
Well, thanks. It was good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thanks for your time.
I'd like to thank Michael for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to chat with him. I did want to mention that we're going to be having a live taping on July the 25th. That's this upcoming Monday. It's 7 p.m. on Zoom to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the show. I'll be joined by Carol Epp and Britta Schroeder, so I hope that you will join us as well. You can register for that at brickyardnetwork.org/live. Also wanted to thank today's sponsors, Amico Brent and the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor on the show, you can get in touch through the network website. That's brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.
We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities whose lands we reside on in the United States, and recognize that we are uninvited guests on the occupied, unceded, and ancestral lands of over 500 nations indigenous to North America. By acknowledging and reflecting upon the contemporary lived experiences and histories of the Indigenous peoples here and globally, we may begin to take essential steps towards creating a more equitable world. Learn more through the hashtag Honor Native Land initiative of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, and consider contributing to Indigenous-led organizations doing important work to further health and wellness, sovereignty, and self-determination of the first people of the lands you reside. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.